VPS from one of these big providers, and then you set up your own email server. Now, notoriously, this is very difficult to do, and most people probably aren't going to be able to do this, but there are a lot of scripts that kind of automate the process for you. So you might have heard of something like MailCow or Mail in a Box, or even Luke Smith's Email Wiz. I definitely used this script back in the day. And they basically automate all the hard parts for you, so you don't need to be some super sysadmin in order to set this up. All you really need is some basic Linux knowledge, and you can call it a day. And this might seem like the ultimate privacy respecting email, but I honestly really do not recommend this for the vast majority of people. And that's because when you have your own email server, so many different things can go wrong. Probably the biggest issue I had whenever I had my own email server was spam. I'm not talking about receiving spam, I'm talking about my emails being perceived as spam. Because if you're often sending emails to big providers like Gmail or Outlook, then very often you'll run into this issue where your email just does not arrive. Because a lot of spammers, they use these small VPSs, these small servers in order to send a boatload of spam, and so a lot of big companies just block them by default. And if you actually want to build up your trust, it can take years before you actually get on the good side of these companies and they decide not to block you. So especially in my case, I need an email for my business. I'm not just doing this as a hobby, so I absolutely need an email that's going to work. And when half my emails are just not arriving to big companies like Gmail or Outlook, that is a huge issue. I really don't want to have to message all of my clients and tell them, oh, can you fish my emails out of spam? Because nothing screams professional like all of your emails ending up in spam. And you also really have to know what you're doing with maintenance and security because you're basically doing all of the maintenance yourself and all of the security yourself. So I really hope you know what you're doing, otherwise it is a vulnerability waiting to happen. And when you're doing your own maintenance, you have to really hope that you're not going to break anything, because if you make one little change, you could completely mess up your mail server's deliverability. Like you make one mistake and all of your emails are just not going to be delivered anymore. So I have my own email server for a long time, but I just really do not recommend it to anyone anymore unless you absolutely know what you're doing. Just because you installed Arch Linux by yourself one time does not make you a Linux expert. And I would say unless you have serious sysadmin skills, I would not even touch this with a 10-foot pole. Now, as far as privacy goes, this is going to be one of the best, but again, only if you really know what you're doing. Because if you're not using good security practices in your server, then anybody can just break in if they really want to, and there's not much you can do about it. So I would say hosting your own email server can either be one of the best options out there or one of the worst, depending on how skilled you are. And that's why I really don't recommend it for most people. But if you really know what you're doing, then it is one of the best. So I can't really put it in base tier, and I can't really put it too low because it is good, so I'm just going to put it in decent tier. But I would say only choose this option if you absolutely know what you're doing, otherwise you are just signing yourself up for unlimited headaches. Next up, we have Skiff. Now, this is a pretty new one. It's only really been around for about a year, but it has been getting really popular lately inside some privacy circles. And you can tell why right on their homepage. They say that they're a privacy-first end-to-end encrypted email. Yes, another service that cares all about your privacy, but I actually think that they can back up their claims. So in their privacy policy, which I like because it's mostly written in simple English, so just normal people can understand it, they really don't collect too much information about you. And by default, all their emails are end-to-end encrypted. So basically, they can't read any of the emails that you send. They're not going to be able to read anything in your inbox. And I would say one of the only downsides is that they don't use PGP. So PGP is basically the gold standard for email encryption, but PGP does have a couple of drawbacks. And one of the drawbacks is that some of the metadata cannot be encrypted. And with PGP, some things in the email, like the subject or the recipient, they cannot be encrypted. Only the contents of the email can be. And Skiff uses their own encryption, which also encrypts the subject and the recipients and all of the metadata, so it should be better, right? Well, the only issue is that it only works for other Skiff accounts. So I don't know how many people you know that also use Skiff, but it's probably not many. And so 99% of the emails that you send to other people are not going to be encrypted. They don't even have some feature where you can encrypt the email and have them unlock it with a password. So that's a little bit unfortunate, but at least all of the emails inside your inbox are going to be safe and sound. They can't read any of it. And one of the best things that Skiff has is the UI. So the UI here is really nice. When you open up an email, everything just looks really nice here, and it's pretty nice to use. I'd say that this is definitely the most aesthetically pleasing private email out there. They have their own phone app as well, which also looks just as good as this. But one of the biggest downsides is that you cannot use this with any third-party clients. So if you want to read these emails in Thunderbird, you just can't. And that's because of their encryption, so you can only really use their apps. And they have an app for Windows and macOS. On Linux, you're just going to have to do things from the web browser. And for me, I'm okay with that because after using Gmail for years, I kind of got used to it. But I know for a lot of people, that's probably going to be a deal breaker. But another nice thing about Skiff is that their free tier is very generous. So much that you're probably thinking, what's the catch? Because with their free tier here, you get 10 gigabytes of storage for free. That is almost unheard of. Most of these private email services just give you 1 gigabyte out of the box if you're lucky. And they even give you a custom domain email for free. So if you have yourname.com, you can just get a yourname.com email address just out of the box for free, which is again also unheard of with these free tiers. So I'd say that this is one of the best deals in email right now. You're not going to see a free tier like this anywhere else. But you might be thinking, what's the catch? And I'm not sure if there is a catch, because the reason that they're able to be so generous is because they're basically riding high off of VC bucks right now. So they got a whole bunch of venture capital money, and that's how they're trying to build up their business. I'm not sure how it's going to work out because I really don't see any reason to use anything but the free tier right now. That's how good it is. But they have gone on record saying that they have enough VC money in order to last for a very long time, so you don't really need to worry that they're going to disappear next year. And so if you're looking for a free privacy respecting email, then I would say that this is one of the best deals out there right now. And this is also probably one of the best emails for normies right now because it is about as simple to sign up for as Gmail. So if your friend is looking for a new email service and you don't want to have to explain the intricacies of PGP encryption, then this is probably going to be one of the best bets out there. Now, they do also have a few additional services like a Google Docs equivalent and a calendar and a drive, and all of these are also encrypted, which is nice. They're definitely not at the same quality level as Google services, but I think that these can be a replacement if you really miss some of those. All of these also have phone apps as well. So I really like Skiff. There's only a few real downsides, which I already mentioned, but like I said, for free email, this is going to be one of the best out there, and that's why I have to put Skiff in excellent tier. Next up, we have StartMail. Now, this logo might be looking familiar because this is from the same people who brought you StartPage, the private search engine, which I covered before in another tier list. And I think that their search engine is very good. It's one of the best out there. But can I say the same for their email service? Well, let's take a look here. So this is going to be private email you can trust. Of course, they're all going to say that. And they do have a lot of good features. They have PGP encryption in their webmail. Their privacy policy is pretty good, but probably their biggest drawback is going to be their pricing. So StartMail is definitely one of the priciest options out there. So they are running a promotion right now, but this is only for the first year. After the first year expires, it is going to be $6 per month for their most basic plan. Of course, they don't have a free tier. And this is only if you want a startmail.com email address. If you want to use a custom domain, it is $7 per month, which is extremely expensive. And I really don't think you're getting that much for how expensive it is. So you do have some nice things like 20 gigabytes of storage, but you can get all of these for cheaper elsewhere. I don't think they have any features that really set it apart from anybody else. Probably their biggest claim to fame is unlimited aliases, so you can basically create as many email addresses as you want. Maybe you would rather have a different email address for your banking than your social media accounts. That's probably a good security practice, but I really don't think that it is worth $7 a month. That is extremely expensive, and I think there are better options out there. I mean, the webmail UI is totally fine, I guess. It definitely looks a lot better than a lot of other ones on this list, but again, I don't think that it's worth $7 a month, and so that is probably the biggest drawback about StartMail. It's good, but there's nothing about it that really sets it apart and makes it worth its price tag. And so unless you're really rich and you like paying an exorbitant amount of money for email, I can't really recommend this for many people, and I'm just going to be putting it in the mediocre tier. For this kind of money, you can get a much better deal almost anywhere else. Now let's talk about Tutanota. Tutanota is probably famous for being the second most popular private email provider behind ProtonMail. So they're all about their privacy and their end-to-end encryption. So by default, your mailbox with Tuna is going to be completely encrypted, and they're not going to be able to read any of your emails. And you don't have to do the whole PGP setup like you have to do with a whole bunch of other ones. And that is because they don't use PGP. So this is a similar case to Skiff. They have their own end-to-end encryption, which you may think is a good thing, but I really don't think it's that good because it really limits the amount of people that you can use end-to-end encryption with. So basically, the only people that you can use end-to-end encryption with is other people that use Tuna, which again is not going to be very many people unless you know a lot of weird privacy nuts, I guess. But that's probably the biggest issue with it. And if you don't really find that to be too big of an issue, then I would say that Tuna is pretty good. As far as privacy goes, it is one of the best. They really respect your privacy and they really don't require you to give out too much personal information to them. And they do have a free tier, but their free tier is not that generous, to be honest. So you get 1 GB of storage, which is not too bad. But they do have a lot of weird limitations on their free tier, like you can only search within the last 4 weeks of your emails. If you want to search through emails older than that, you just can't on the free tier. And if your free email address is inactive for 6 months, then they will just close it. And one other big downside is that, again, like Skiff, you can't use a third-party email client like Thunderbird. You can only use their webmail client or their mobile apps. I'm not sure if they have a desktop app either. They also don't have an email import option, so if you want to say import all your emails from something like Gmail or Outlook, they just don't have that option right now, which again might also be a deal breaker. If you do want to pay for it, it costs €3.60 per month, which is kind of just in the middle range, not too expensive but not too cheap. And you do get some nice things like custom domain email, you get a calendar, you get a few extra aliases. But in terms of features, I really don't think they have too many killer features. Their webmail UI is just okay. I know a lot of people complain about it. I really don't think it's that bad, but a lot of people don't like it. So I don't know, you might like it or hate it. For me, I'm kind of indifferent. But of course, their biggest claim to fame is always going to be their privacy. So they are very private. They don't collect any personal information about you, and they are, I think, one of the only email providers that allows you to pay with Monero. You do have to do it through a third party. There are a couple of hoops that you have to jump over, but if you really want to be anonymous, then I would say that Tuna is a pretty good option. And so if you care about privacy, I think that this is a very good option. But of course, it still has the same drawbacks as something like Skip does, and that's why I'm just going to be putting this in the excellent tier. But it's still a very good option. Finally, last and most definitely least, we have Yahoo email. Does anybody actually still use this? I'm not sure, but every once in a while I still run across somebody in the wild who still has a Yahoo email address. Look, I get it. Back in the day, everybody had a Yahoo email address. It was the coolest thing ever, but it is not the 2000s anymore. It's time to grow up and get yourself a real email address. And in fact, the only reason I'm even including Yahoo here is because they actually have the high score for the biggest data breach of all time. So back in 2016, over 3 billion Yahoo accounts were hacked. And I've made some pretty big mistakes in my life, but at least I can say that I've never messed up this bad. So literally every single customer who had ever signed up for Yahoo, and the data that these hackers got included names, email addresses, telephone numbers, even unencrypted security questions and answers, dates of birth, and hashed passwords. So they compromised just about everything. These hackers have got to be pretty proud of themselves. They basically got the high score in hacking. So I guess congratulations Yahoo, well done for being #1 in the list of the biggest data breaches of all time. So of course you should never use Yahoo email for anything. It is time to get a new email address if that is what you have been using, and literally any other option on this tier list is going to be better than them. And in case you weren't completely convinced, yes, they also send all of your information to third-party advertisers to give you better targeted ads. Isn't that nice of them? So yes, obviously Yahoo is going straight into botnet tier. So in conclusion, if you want my recommendation for the best email providers out there, I would say that ProtonMail is probably the best paid option. So if you have $5 a month that you want to spend on email, ProtonMail is probably going to be the best deal that you can get. But the best free email out there is probably going to be Skiff because they have a very generous free tier. But I think that you're not really going to go wrong with any of these from the top 3 tiers, except for maybe hosting your own email. I really don't recommend it unless, again, you know what you're doing. But that's just my opinion. You can tell me your favorite email provider in the comments. But hopefully you learned something from this video. And if you only learned one thing, it's that it's finally time to let go of your Yahoo email address. I know it's going to be emotional, but you can do it. If you've been using Audacity for a while, then there's a good chance that you might have heard of the big drama that went down in the free and open source software community a couple of years ago. That's because Audacity right here, which if you don't know is a free and open source audio editor that is very useful. And a couple of years back in 2021, Audacity was acquired by this company called Minesweeper. And it doesn't sound that scary, but the problem is that Minesweeper almost immediately started making a lot of really questionable decisions with Audacity. Like for example, they wanted to introduce telemetry, which of course a lot of people in the free and open source software community don't appreciate. A lot of people, including me, don't really want to send some random company a whole bunch of data about your system. And even worse, the companies that they were sending these analytics to were Google and Yandex, 2 of the companies that you probably trust least with your personal data. And not only did they want to add telemetry, but they also started making some really weird decisions to their privacy policy. Like they added this clause right here to their privacy policy that basically says that they'll send data to law enforcement if it is requested, which is really weird. I don't want my audio editing software to send my data to law enforcement or authorities. And they added some other things like now people under the age of 13 can no longer use this software, but Audacity is actually used a lot in schools, so that's not good. And Minesweeper just ended up making so many bad decisions about Audacity in such a short period of time that a lot of people just completely lost faith in Audacity as a project. Back then, a lot of people were talking about forking Audacity and making their own version of Audacity without all of these stupid changes. And even today, if you search up Audacity, you can still find people talking about how Audacity is spyware, Audacity is dead. But I recently started using Audacity again to clean up my audio whenever I'm recording these videos, and I wanted to know, is all of this still true? Is Audacity actually spyware? Or have things changed over the past couple of years? And that's what I'm going to explore in this video. So I'm going to let you know if Audacity is still safe to use, if you should be using Audacity, or if you should be using something else. And so let's just get into it. So first off, we have to talk about the telemetry, of course. That is probably the biggest issue that a lot of people do not appreciate. So let's check their current privacy policy and see what it's all about. So the 2 forms of telemetry that they have right now is update checking. So basically whenever you start up your Audacity, it is going to ping back to their servers and see if the software needs to be updated or not. And it also has error reporting. So if Audacity crashes for whatever reason, the developers probably want to know what's going on. So it will send a few things like your system information in order to better troubleshoot the problem. And they send a little bit of information, but not too much. So they anonymize your IP address, and the update checker also pings back which operating system you're running, which country you live in, but that's about it. And unfortunately, this is opt-out if you're on Windows or Mac OS. So you do need to go into the settings and disable this. And for crash reporting, you can just choose to not send the data whenever it crashes. It'll pop up a little box asking you if you want to send it or not, and you can just not send it. And that's how you can mitigate the telemetry. But if you're on Linux, then actually the version that you get from your package manager probably isn't going to have any telemetry in it. So this Audacity, I just downloaded straight from my package manager, and I'm an Arch Linux, so I can actually view the build script and see what's going on whenever they build this. So this is the script that builds Audacity, and you can see here whenever you build this, you can actually turn off all the networking features. So it completely disables all of this, no crash reports, no update check. So this is not going to send back any data, and I think this is true for every Linux distribution. I'm not 100% sure, but at least for Arch, you can rest easy that it's not sending back any data. And it makes sense because if you're using a package manager, then you probably don't need an automatic update check. You would just update it through your package manager. And after all the backlash, they decided to walk back using Google and Yandex for their analytics, and they just use their own self-hosted version of it now.